Our scripture lesson this morning first comes from the book of Romans, chapter 10, verses 14 through 15, found on page 194 of your pew Bibles. But how are they to call on one in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in one whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone to proclaim him? And how are they to proclaim him unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. And then our second reading comes from the book of Matthew, 28:19, found on page 41, and this is the Great Commission. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. The word of God for the people of God.
As we gather this day, this Labor Day weekend, we're well aware of this weekend's meaning. The annual celebration, as I said, of Labor Day. Tomorrow, both in the United States as well as in Canada, persons will gather with family, they're going to gather with friends to enjoy a day of celebrating the achievements, the contributions that are made by the American labor movement to our economy. a holiday that we've celebrated since it was first proposed in 1882 by the then Central Labor Union and first celebrated in New York City, September 5th, 1882, and finally made a federal holiday in June 1894. And we all find ourselves at one time or another having to assess whether what we do as a choice of labor for hire is worthwhile for us, and needing to decide whether we continue, we change jobs, or retire. That being said, I did some searching for quotes and quips about Labor Day, and I came up with a couple of them for us today. You could feel free to share them tomorrow with your family and your friends, or not. The question was asked, why the government didn't pay attention to the issues of the local workers who worked in caves on Labor Day. And the reason they didn't, they considered those minor issues. I didn't say they were great, I just said I was going to share them. Did you know that the issue of labor dates back to the early days of our world? In the time of the dinosaurs, there was one dinosaur that did absolutely no labor at all. She was called my Backosaur. Yeah, you're shaking your heads, but like you won't tell it to someone. I know you'll tell it to someone. And there's a quip you can use for that person who won't do anything and just sits around. We've all heard of someone like that. The only thing that ever sat on its way to success was a hen. Think about it. Thank you. Anyone here ever wonder when it was time to, as they say, call it quits? You ever reach that point? Several times. Here's some advice I ran across that might answer that question to kind of help you decide what you do. Quote, as I've gotten older and wiser, I discovered there are 6 things I really loved about my job. Payday, lunchtime, quitting time, vacation time, holidays, and of course retirement. That's when you know, if you're thinking of those things, it's a time to do a reassessment about why we do what we do. But when it comes to our faith and sharing that faith, the disciples whom we are studying are truly the examples of what our labor for the faith is to be in our lives, never ending. And the one who could truly be called a disciple, who was the epitome of love, was our third disciple for our consideration, John, nicknamed the disciple of love. Because that's the major focus of John's entire gospel. We often hear of someone truly involved in a labor of love, and John, as well as all the disciples of Jesus, were the epitome of that effort, which is, quote, a labor voluntarily undertaken or performed without consideration of any benefit or reward. In other words, to do what we do because we love it. Do you know where that phrase comes from? Both in the New Testament books of Thessalonians and Hebrews, where it reads, for God is not unrighteous to forget your work and your labor of love. Who was John? He was, as many know, the youngest of the disciples, searching, and as we all do in our youth, searching for some purpose in life. He was the younger brother of Peter, and he was the reflective type. He was that deep thinker. He was the one who was always asking why and seeking for those inner answers of life. In other words, while somebody else was doing all the work, he was contemplating. He had been a follower of John the Baptist till Jesus called him, and he followed Jesus from that moment forward. We know he had a temper that needed curbing. As evidence, when he and his brother demanded, after a village rejected him, that Jesus send down a bolt of lightning or something to destroy that village, it was then that Jesus nicknamed him Son of Thunder. But under that rough and tumble exterior, Jesus saw a caring spirit which simply needed guidance, direction. And Jesus took the time and care to bring that part out of him for all to see and to know in their lives, then as well as today. John was the church's first theologian, challenging one of the biggest heresies of his day and today of what happens to us following death. John was the writer of the book of Revelation. He's the disciple proving the importance of investing in the youth of our churches and communities for our future. Like this young man down here, right? We're investing in you and her. Years ago, I was witness to such an important proof of what I'm sharing. It happened through two of the youth of the church where I was the pastor at the time. The first was our son Ian. He didn't have any option. And the other was his high school friend Jamie. They were both part of the church youth group. They were part of that year's church work camp troop who traveled to the United States Appalachia territory for a work camp experience through the church. They'd been there a couple days, and one day they returned from a day of repairing a trailer that the residents call home, where they had replaced broken pipes so the people could have a working restroom and cleaned up trash around the trailer to prevent poisonous snakes coming down the mountain at night and getting into their garbage. On the way home, we stopped at the local Walmart to buy a few things for our time at the cabins where we were staying. And I remember so well, as Jamie was checking out, and as she came through the line, Jamie started crying. No one knew why. She just cried. And I asked her what was wrong, and she just answered the standard line, nothing. That's her way of telling me, I don't want to talk about it now. And our son, one of her best friends, got no answer. She just sat in the van on the way back to the camp, crying by herself. Well, the next day before we went back to the site, we and the other teams there for the week, we gathered for the morning devotions, and Jamie finally told us why she had cried. She said, after spending all day working on that home, seeing the way they lived every day, we headed back and decided to stop at Walmart. And as I was going through the checkout, I put my stuff down, the lady scanned it, I gave her the money. And then it hit me. I can do this anytime I want. These people can never do this. It's not fair, she said. And I realized how fortunate I am, how lucky I am to be born in the family that I'm in. And I started to cry for the family that we're helping. She got the meaning of labor of love. That's why Jesus called the immature and impressionable John to be a disciple, because Jesus knew the importance of his life and his learning would be and could be for every generation who would learn from the lessons that John gleaned from Jesus, including today's generation of you and me. Young John was impressionable. He came to understand Jesus' words when Jesus said, "For God so loved the world." When Jesus said, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." When Jesus told the disciples there was no greater love than laying down your life for some friends. John was the one who was so emotionally close to Jesus that when told Jesus was no longer in the tomb following the crucifixions, he ran to the tomb. Literally went inside to see for himself. His love for and commitment for Jesus was that great. But do we today truly grasp the concept of love, in Greek, logos, of which John spoke and wrote? I ask that because in our culture we use the word love for so many things, from our favorite food to our pets, to loving our favorite sports team, go Hawks, to loving a car, loving a spouse, and many other levels and meanings. The Greeks have three words for our love. The first is eros, which was used for the concept of physical attraction. That's not the one that John meant, though. The second Greek term was philia, which is used to describe the concept of friendship, where we get Philadelphia. And that's not what John meant. The third term that the Greeks used was agape. We've heard it before, which meant a spiritual, soul-deep love and unconditional, sacrificial love, which was John's meaning. With our English language having only one term, when we say love of something, it can sometimes be confusing of what's meant. Is it any wonder children have a difficult time grasping this? And let me just share a couple of comments that children have made concerning love, just to point out how difficult it is to truly understand this concept of agape. Andrew, age 6, one of the people, it said about two specific people who are in love. He says, one of the people, how do you know? Because one has freckles, and so we find somebody else who has freckles too. That's love. Little May, who was age 9, made this observation. No one's sure why it happens, why love happens, but I heard it has something to do with how you smell. That's why perfume and deodorant are so popular. When asked how to tell if two persons in a restaurant are in love, think about this the next time you go out to eat, as youngsters share. Sarah said, romantic adults usually are all dressed up, so if they are just wearing jeans, it might mean they used to go out and they just broke up. That's why they dress up to go out. Sandra, age 7, was a little more specific, saying, see if the man has lipstick on his face. And I think 9-year-old Christine probably came the closest when she said, it's love if they order one of those desserts that are on fire. They like to order that because it's just like how their hearts are, on fire. Ah, yeah. Now, to be clear, those young definitions of love are referring to what the Greeks call eros and philia. But John's concept of logos, the third definition that is our term for love, is when it grows beyond the mere physical, beyond the mere social connection, to the soul-deep morphing into a singular bond between persons. John is the one who defined Jesus' meaning of love connection between us and God. And finally, John's greatest contribution to the Christian faith was his sharing about the importance of vision in mind and soul. As mentioned earlier, John's been often understood as the first theologian of Christianity, challenging with his gospel the heresy of Gnosticism, which held that only certain persons in any culture, the elect, would be able to reach heaven rather than anyone who proclaimed faith in Jesus Christ. In other words, only the elite of society. This understanding came to John when he was imprisoned on the island of Patmos for the remainder of his life, following his capture by Rome and his being banished to this uninhabited island situated off the west coast of Turkey in the continent of Asia. Imagine being probably in the ballpark of about 25, 30 years old and being told that you're going to spend the rest of your life living on an island with nobody. That would get rough. And while there, he had a vision from God about the church for the future, a vision of hope for the disciples then and now. Feeling hopeless and helpless about the culture and their morals. And it was a vision of God's assurance for people, you and me, as we wrestle with the persecution and the hatred within culture. This has always been a difficult situation for me to understand. I had a pastor friend of mine share with me many years ago. Made this clear to me. My friend would every so often take a week away from society. You just take a week and crash. Just crash. Escape. He couldn't be contacted. Nobody could find him. I was talking with his wife one day when he was on one of these retreats, because it didn't make sense to me. And I finally asked her, why does he go on those retreats? To which she responded, don't you get it? That's a nice way of saying, duh. When I said no, she then shared, he's an introvert. He's not like you, meaning me. When he's in the public eye, when he's with people, it takes every bit of his energy to meet and greet, to be in that public eye. And so there are times when he needs to get away to re-energize. And so there are times when he needs to get away and just reflect. Then it made sense to me. He's like the disciple John. I'm more like Peter. And it is this opposite effect which made our friendship so close. It made it possible for so many years. We could meet together and give a balance to each other. He with his reflective insights, me with my love of talking and sharing with people. In other words, he would listen and I just keep on talking. The Apostle Peter got the Church of Jesus Christ energized, motivated early on. But it was his brother John who decades later gave it spiritual depth to continue in the midst of what was going to be very serious challenge right up to today. The Church of Jesus Christ needs people like John. They're deep thinkers. The ones who often are behind the scenes, but they provide that strong foundation that allows the extroverts to do the ministry, go out and do the ministry with joy. They ask the questions. They give the spiritual insights. They undergird the leadership with long-lasting spiritual guidance and direction. They are, for lack of a better term, they are the gurus from whom God provides spiritual love and sustaining spiritual care to the church. As I shared at the beginning of today's disciple lesson, John was the youngest disciple and the only disciple who lived a full, natural life. But most of it was while in exile, alone on a deserted island. I'd go crazy. I would go crazy. John went reflective. Like his brothers and sisters of the faith, he sacrificed his life in service for Christ, but in a different way, sharing with you and sharing with me of the importance of that spiritual love foundation of which Jesus spoke. A love so great that we'd be willing to give our full commitment, to give our very lives to share the need for any and all who have this spiritual love, that agape in our spirits. That was John's vision. The vision for you, the vision for me, until that time when Christ returns to claim any and all who've given their lives to God's calling in whatever way our physical and our spiritual abilities call and lead us. There'll be a time this week, if we're aware of the opportunity, when we can share that faith with someone who's seeking, someone who needing more in their lives, needing a hope, needing a helper. When a moment arises, allow Christ to inspire you. Be listening for that inner calling to you to be that disciple of Jesus for him or her.
Miles on the highway, every day moving so fast, taking all the wrong ways out. Never saw you coming, stopping me in my tracks, keeping me from the long way down. Doesn't matter just how many times I tried, there could only be a single reason why. So tell me, how do miracles just happen like that, happen like that, happen like that? You can see the stars align, but I know Some will say it's magic, but I know that you did all that. You're the reason, there's no doubt. Doesn't matter just how many times I tried, there could only be a single reason why. So tell me, how do miracles just happen like that? Happen like that, happen like that. You can see the stars align, but I know that it's more than timing. How do miracles just happen like that? Happen like that, happen like that. Right before I hit the ground, son, oh, you came along and found me. Right before I hit the ground, son, oh, you came along and found me. There's no doubt when I feel your love. Call me crazy and out of touch, but I know that it's from above. Tell me, how do miracles just happen like that? Happen like that, happen like that. You can see the stars align, but I know that it's more than timing. How do miracles just happen like that? Happen like that, happen like that. Right before I hit the ground, son, oh, you came along